This is an eMachines EL135210E that I purchased from a friend. Released around 2011, this machine boasted 4 GB of RAM, an AMD Athlon processor, and NVIDIA graphics. Now, NVIDIA graphics sounds pretty good, but then you realize that the particular GPU in this machine is ranked 601st out of 601 from User Benchmark and has a value rating of 0 from VideoBenchmark.net. The question is, can this system be upgraded into a usable gaming machine? I'm Caden from Kepler Electronics, and let's find out. This PC was built in a Thermaltake Versa H15, which was among the cheapest micro ATX cases when I was putting this build together. It also looked nice compared to the other cases in this price range. It had space for 2.5-inch drives, along with space for a full-size GPU. The case comes with one exhaust fan, but since the motherboard didn't have any external fan headers, I just removed it. One unfortunate thing is that the I/O shield doesn't come off the old case, so there's kind of a gaping hole where the I/O shield should be. Since the back of the computer isn't commonly accessed, this shouldn't be a huge issue though. Obviously, the first step in the build was to replace the CPU. The motherboard socket is an AM3, which meant that I would have to use a relatively old CPU, but that wasn't a huge deal. I replaced the Athlon X2 with an Athlon X4 620. This trades a slightly slower clock speed for 2 extra cores. This could be upgraded to a Phenom or other CPU for a bit more money in the future, but I decided to go with a more affordable CPU to keep costs down. I kept the original CPU cooler, but I would have swapped it out if I'd upgraded to any more powerful of a CPU. In order to have even a chance at playing more modern large tier games or any creative software, more RAM needed to be added. I swapped out the two 2GB sticks of Samsung RAM for 2 4GB sticks of generic RAM. Used DDR3 RAM can be had for relatively cheap, but of course, there are always risks of something going wrong. The boot drive is a 1TB 2.5-inch hard drive taken from an old Lenovo laptop. This was another cost-saving measure since I had the laptop sitting around, and it was suffering from slowdown issues and was becoming practically unusable. Of course, the absolutely bottom tier GPU had to be replaced. I decided to go with a GTX 660 from PNY. This GPU is fairly affordable and is extremely well priced for what you get. Plus, it's based on the Kepler architecture, so it was a perfect fit for me. This card is really good for the types of games I play and could probably play more modern games at lower settings. I know this GPU will be bottlenecked by the CPU, but I would personally rather spend the extra $20 on a slightly better GPU that is bottlenecked now than buy a GPU that will serve no purpose once the CPU is upgraded. The card was extremely dusty, so I disassembled it to clean and replaced the aging thermal paste. There was an enormous amount of dust inside. A bit of vacuuming and wiping later, it looks passable. I was unable to completely clean the fan, but it is slightly cleaner than it was when I purchased it. This whole build is powered by an EVGA 600-watt power supply, which, aside from the case, was the only new part purchased for this build. I would recommend going new on a PSU because it's nearly the same price as a used power supply, and you just have the peace of mind that you're getting a working product. That being said, the first power supply had a broken fan, not to mention it has significant burning smell coming from it. Thankfully, Best Buy was good about it and let me swap it out for a brand new power supply. Wire management was a bit difficult due to the power supply not being modular, but I think that it turned out okay. The hard drive cage proved to be a nice place to stow the unused cables. But the question is, how does this computer perform? Well, I have a list of 5 games that we'll be testing to show what this computer can do. Footage was recorded through an external capture device to get a more accurate view of how the PC performs. Our first game is the Talos Principle, which performed extremely well, aside for some tearing issues which were easy to look past. I found that the recommended settings that the game automatically assigned worked best, and provided a stunning graphical experience for such a low-spec system. I ran this game at 1080p, and saw FPS typically around 40 in the hub areas, with jumps to 60 and 70 in certain puzzles. Our next game is Dirt 3, which performed flawlessly on high settings at 1080p, keeping a fairly steady FPS above 100. This game is a pretty open and shut case, it runs amazing. Minecraft runs acceptably. It does lag when generating terrain and locks up when transitioning between servers or texture packs. I had the game running on relatively low settings and it still had some hiccups. It's not amazing, but it isn't terrible. It's definitely playable and could probably be improved with Optifine or another enhancement mod. My FPS counter wouldn't work with Minecraft, so I'll just let the video speak for itself. Kerbal Space Program performed well on high settings at 1080p, with FPS ranging between 30 and 50 in the assembly screen and between 45 and 60 in flight. The game had little stutter and performed as well as much higher spec computers. Of course, it wouldn't be a benchmark in 2019 without trying out Fortnite, which was definitely playable on the lowest settings. There were a few lag spikes which aren't ideal, but it was still playable with FPS staying generally between 40 and 60. It did perform better indoors or at more secluded locations, but that is to be expected. It isn't beautiful, but if you want to play with friends, it can be done. Since this channel dabbles in a lot of engineering stuff, I decided to try out some multi-part assemblies in Autodesk's Inventor CAD software. I used the printer and jet engine example assemblies and just panned them around. The assemblies move smoothly aside from the snapping built into the software itself. I didn't model anything, but from this test, I have confidence that this computer could handle it. I guess overall, this computer is average. It performs well in older games, but in modern titles it falls behind. It works well in creative applications, which I'm really happy with. For under $150 total, this computer is pretty powerful. Your cost may vary due to the nature of buying used, but with the patience to wait for good bids, you can most likely find the parts for the same price I paid or thereabout. This has been a really fun project to work on, and if you found this interesting, I recommend you give this type of project a shot, even just as a thought experiment. Thanks for watching, and if you fancy more tech videos, be sure to subscribe.